All right, so, gee, a packed house again. With that, Mark, take the roll, please. I apologize for being late. I was at the governor's prayer breakfast.
Representative Banks.
Here.
Representative Conrad. Representative Heiner.
Excused on Conrad.
Representative Knapp. Here. Representative Larson.
Here.
Representative Lawley.
Here.
Representative Tarver. Here. Representative Western. Here. Chairman Burkhart.
Here.
Thank you.
So first bill for our consideration is Senate File 116, Protection of Lawful Commerce in Firearms. And Chairman Dockstader. Just proceed, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Bring you Protection of Lawful Firearms, Senate File 116. Yeah, there we go. Okay, thank you. So, Chairman, members of the committee, last year I was invited to come and grab the big ride down to a national show that involves firearms and businesses in a state to the southwest of us. Invited to catch the ride out of Cheyenne and make it down there and back in one day. I wanted to go to the show, but I declined the ride and decided I'd do it at my own expense. Commercial airline, still down and back the same day, because I wanted to see all that went on in this show. Big part of our lives, the Second Amendment, both in business and just in basic rights. So I met the party that was coming from Cheyenne. I caught up with them there, and we toured the show and visited with those from Wyoming specifically who are involved in firearms manufacturing and products and so forth. And it came to me that this is a big part of the economy in this state, especially after I saw all that were involved. Full declaration, I've got a firearms manufacturer in my district, and I tend to take all the government officials over the years to that manufacturing facility and give them an opportunity to see what's produced in a small valley out west. And all those visits go very well. But as I came back from that trip to that big show, I realized it's a bigger picture than just my own area. It's a picture that involves all of Wyoming. And I sensed there was probably more interest in bringing business to Wyoming. People had already started doing that. And I thought, how can we better lay some business protections for them to come here and do business in Wyoming? So that led to the Protection of Lawful Commerce in Firearms. This is a bill that provides immunity from specified civil lawsuits to firearm manufacturers, sellers, specifying any exemption, providing for the definitions. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll go through the bill briefly.
Please.
Because it's the overall, thank you, Mr. Chairman, it's the overall concept I'm trying to have happen here. Of course, what I just mentioned in the title on page 1, definitions on page 2 and 3, ammunition, firearm accessories, manufacturer, qualified civil liability action, qualified product, seller, trade associate, and unlawful misuse. We tried to include all the definitions that we could think of in this. And we had the sellers of qualified products, how they qualify for civil immunity. So here's who we made sure that we're not protecting: convicted felons on page 4. Doesn't apply to those folks. They knowingly if they unknowingly reviewed or received anything, then that doesn't protect them either. That's on page 4. Page 5, they knowingly abetted or conspired with any other persons in sale, they're not protected. There's defects in the manufacturer's product, that's not defected on the bottom of page 5. And the felon language is inserted on page 6. There's no immunity for the felons. And we wanted to make sure we were not protecting the wrong people. We're trying to protect those businesses who want to come to Wyoming. manufacture their product and do business in this state that is probably well known for being a Second Amendment state. I look at the bill, Mr. Chairman, as a business protection bill for something that's a big part of our Wyoming life and culture. That, Mr. President, that's the bill. Thank you, or Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So committee questions for the sponsor? Representative Lawley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Dockstader, I think you've done a great job of putting some sidebars on this qualified immunity bill. And I did have one question about on page 7, the last provision. It's, as I understand it, you're making it retroactive, which is a little unusual for us to do that, I think. But could you just talk a little bit about that? Why we would want to do that?
Mr. Chairman?
Thank you. Setting it up. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Representative Lawley, setting it up for those who are here doing business now. It's felt like we needed to do something that was a bigger picture. I should have had the engrossed version to know that page 7. Thank you. Sorry.
Yeah.
Other questions? Any other questions? Representative Knapp.
Mr. Chairman, Senator, I had one on page 5, and I'll just point this out as an example. It says any record required to be kept under federal or state law under 10 and 11. Does this bill at all take into consideration the legality of a mandate?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Chairman?
Representative Knapp, I'm not sure that I fully understand the question, but takes in the requirement for a mandate. Help me understand a little better, sir.
Representative?
I think sometimes when there's a difference of opinion on what is considered law as handed down by the federal government and whether a mandate fits under that guise, I understand this bill to deal with just law. That would be done by Congress, I would imagine, and be accepted. Does this also take into consideration the issues of mandates?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Chairman?
Representative Knapp, I'll say I honestly can't answer that because I don't understand it well enough. There might be somebody that can, but I sense that I was trying to create something I was aware of federal law, but I was trying to create something more specific to Wyoming. Thank you.
Other questions? Any other questions? Representative Heiner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Dockstader, on page 3 in the engrossed version, we added subparagraph B about providing products to other people. Could you explain why that was added to the original bill? What was the thought and conversation behind that? Bottom of page, on line 16, page 3.
Chairman Dockstader?
Yeah. Mr. Chairman and Representative Heiner, as I recall, trying to recall the conversation around that, we were trying to protect if it was a sold product and that someone not knowingly had stepped into this situation and said, okay, am I protected? I'm trying to remember the conversation. Let me just look for a moment.
Mr. Chairman.
Representative Heiner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Dockstader, could this be to protect the manufacturer if the gun is transferred to someone else without background checks and all the requirements that are needed, so that any transaction performed by private citizens could not fall back upon the manufacturer?
Mr. Chairman, Representative, it does do that, but I still think we should have the necessary background checks in place. The manufacturer, it seems my experience is that I've watched them go back and chase their cases, try to chase them all the way back to the manufacturer when they weren't a part of this secondary sale.
Right. Other questions? Senator Dockstader, just one, and I'm on page 3 under seller, and I'm not out to confuse the issue, but would this include, because you've specified US Code 18, Title 18, would this affect or apply to people who only make and sell muzzle loading firearms? And not that I've ever heard of a case where someone, has tried to sue for misuse of a muzzle loader.
Mr. Chairman, no, it wasn't intended for that.
Okay.
It's a person licensed to sell.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Representative Larson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So on page 3, line 16, we're back on that paragraph B. Would this apply to, let's say I had a weapon and I wanted to sell it to somebody that I knew? Is that what it's referring to, or is it referring to a business transaction?
Mr. Chairman.
Senator?
No person who is legally provided, Representative Larson, no person who is legally provided a qualified product to any other person is liable for damages caused by the other person's actions. So it technically, with that wording, then it does protect the seller in the secondary sale.
Right. Any other questions? Any other questions? Okay, Senator, thank you. Just hang with us. Public comment, one of the 4 of you. And for the committee and for those here, due to the next bill we'll consider, I have allowed public testimony remotely today. You can see some of this. I understand there was a group of school children also may want to speak. Okay, so please identify yourself for the record and continue.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Nephi Cole, Nephicole. I'm the Director of Government Relations and State Affairs for the National Shooting Sports Foundation. We run the largest trade show of its kind in the world to the state to the south of us once a year, and we have been able to host groups of legislators and the executive branch from the state before. And a lot of people come there to recruit companies, such as those companies that have moved to Wyoming. We have 9,000 members, and they are everybody that makes, moves, or sells a firearm, ammunition, or component in the United States of America. There are stores like Cabela's and Shields. They are manufacturers like Glock and Smith & Wesson, Federal Premium Ammunition, Vortex Optics, Leupold, anybody in the professional firearms space. So we're here in support of this bill, the Protection of the Lawful Commerce in Arms Act. We actually have a federal corollary to this bill. It was passed in 2005, and the federal corollary was passed as a result of a series of frivolous lawsuits that began in about 1998. And it was there's a lot of information about it online, and folks talking about breaking the industry by killing it through the death of 1,000 cuts. And we were very fortunate that we had that Congress overwhelmingly passed the Protection of the Lawful Commerce in Arms Act. And that bill there were many frivolous lawsuits ongoing at that time. And the intent of that bill was not to excuse poor manufacturing or anything like that, but it was simply to say that an entity that produced a product, that the product works as intended and does what it's supposed to, should not be held liable for the actions of a third party. We think that that's good law. Unfortunately, in the current political climate at the national level, individuals have made it a goal, and including the current occupant of the large White House has said that they would like to repeal the Protection of the Lawful Commerce in Arms Act so that people can, again, begin frivolous lawsuits against gun companies. And we really appreciate what we consider a belt and suspenders approach of making sure that there are state laws that do protect lawful commerce. Thank you for looking at this. We thank the sponsor who's brought the bill. We think it's a good bill, and stand for any questions if you have any.
Representative Tarver.
Mr. Cole, thank you for your testimony here. And you've read this bill?
I have.
Is there anything we can improve upon it from what you've seen? That's my only question.
A great question. Did not come prepared to suggest amendments to the bill. I think it's a good bill. I heard one of the questions that came earlier regarding, different types of laws and things like that, or rules versus regulations versus opinions, and there are some controversial ones right now by some regulatory agencies. But I would say that as manufacturers, all of our members are FFLs, federal firearms licensees. And when we are given directives, we follow them. And that's just, that's without exception. You're not going to find a member of our industry that when a federal agency says, this is the law, you're going to obey it this way. We don't question that. We follow that.
Other questions? Representative Heiner.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Mr. Cole, I'm going to ask a question that may be outside of your purview, but in the cost of a firearm, how much is just for defending litigation? How much of the cost of the firearm actually goes for litigation and liability issues?
I actually
Cole?
can't, Mr. Chairman, Representative Heiner, I apologize. I can't answer that question. I can tell you that it's, costs are increasing. There are challenges in our industry with access to finance and with access to things like insurance, where there's been an enormous amount of federal pressure following, it's a very clear timeline following the frivolous lawsuits when that kind of petered out, to then begin denying, pushing for the denial of other necessary parts of commerce. And so it's something that does increase our costs, and we're wary of it. There isn't a huge amount of profit to the individual companies in the space. That said, it's a wonderful industry. We're very proud of it, and we think it's pretty fundamental to being American.
Follow-up?
Follow-up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Cole. You led right into my second question, which is ESG and the impacts it may be having on your industry. It's something that this committee takes very seriously. We'll likely take that subject up during the interim. We've seen a number of bills this year, but tell us what the impacts of the environmental and social guidance is having on your industry for financing as well as being able to sell firearms.
Mr. Cole, please.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I think you probably will hear some testimony later on at some point. It's very challenging. So in about 2013, there was an effort, it's called Operation Choke Point. Operation Choke Point was a coordinated directive from a previous administration who lived in a large White House to through the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation and the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency to put firearms manufacturers on a list that was a secret list of disfavored industries. And then they compelled a lot of great financial institutions to create new sets of rules in dealing with companies that were on this blacklist. And that resulted in the debanking of a number of entities within the firearms world, some of the largest and most profitable companies in our space. The mechanism was to require additional auditing of companies. If you chose to do business with firearms entities, you were audited at a higher rate, which then increased the costs to these legitimate financial institutions. And it made it extremely difficult for them to their credit, many of them did maintain those relationships. And we have some phenomenal at national level and of course at state level institutions that continue to support the industry and continue to today. In 2018, there was a new, so that was shut down when Congress found out about it. There were some hearings, some letters that went out, and they were instructed that they should not be doing this anymore. So there was no law, rule, or regulation that stopped that. It was just a Department of Justice sent out a letter to banks and service providers asking them not to do that anymore. The Trump administration sought to correct that issue through the issuance of a rule called the Fair Access to Financial Services Rule. That rule came, unfortunately, at the end of the administration, and within 60 days of the new administration, that rule was stricken. And so it made it, it allowed discrimination to continue against the industry. That discrimination does exist today. There are several very large entities that have declared policies that they will not do business with our industry. And so we are included in that. So the ESG scoring, if you do business with firearms, that's considered as part of that scoring. It's challenging. It's about 50% of the credit market is made up of companies that have some type of discriminatory policy against our industry. It does increase costs, makes it difficult to be able to figure out who you're going to bank with, what kinds of credit cards you can use, things like that. So we think that everybody should have fair access to those services. I apologize for the tangent. I know that's not what this committee hearing is about, but it is important. We also realize how sticky it is and how challenging it is in crafting something like that. And we respect the legislature for the challenge that presents.
Okay. So Mr. Cole will probably take that up in the interim and would look for your testimony at that time on that issue. Any other questions? Other questions for Mr. Cole? Okay, thank you. Anyone else in the room? We've added someone, so. Nope. Any other testimony? Okay, anyone virtually, Kelly? Not for this bill. Okay, with that, I'll close public testimony. Committee? Moved by Lawley, seconded by Larson, who has become very good at that. I think he enjoys it. Okay. Discussion on the bill. Representative Lawley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I really do support this bill. I think it's needed. I think it's very well crafted as a qualified immunity, which means the immunity that's given is qualified well. Again, I raised the issue of the retroactive provision. I normally would say as a policy matter, I don't like retroactive legislation, but I do think in this case, it's appropriate and needed to be retroactive, so.
Representative Lawley, I guess I'm not reading section 2 in that manner. I read it, this act shall apply to any cause of action
Maybe
occurring
not, yeah.
on or after the effective date.
You might be right about that.
I don't see any
Yeah.
retroactivity in here. It starts on July 1st, 2023. So if something happened between now and then, this doesn't apply to them.
I
We-
stand corrected.
Okay, we generally don't apply
Yes,
retroactive statutes.
it must
so
have been kind of late last night.
It was.
I
I
stand
was-
corrected.
yes.
You're right. But I'm on
Okay.
for the bill.
Okay. Any other comments? Representative Larson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd just like to echo what Representative Lawley said. This is a great bill, well crafted. Thank you to the bringer, and thank you for all the industry support as well.
Right. So in committee, for full disclosure, just so you know, and anyone watching on Zoom knows, I would qualify personally under page 3, Romanet 7 as a seller. So. Okay, committee? Question being called. Mark, take roll. We are voting on Senate File 116, Protection of Lawful Commerce and Firearms.
Representative Banks.
Aye.
Representative Conrad.
Aye.
Representative Heiner.
Aye.
Representative Knapp.
Aye.
Representative Larson.
Aye.
Representative Lawley.
Aye.
Representative Tarver. Representative Western. Chairman Burkhart.
Aye.
9 ayes, 0 noes, do pass.
Okay, Senate File 116, Protection of Lawful Commerce and Firearms has passed the Minerals Committee. Senator, do you have someone to carry this on the floor for you? Okay. Thank you for your patience, and hope we weren't too late for you. We held over for you from the other day. We know you were chairing. Okay, all right. Okay, thank you. Next bill for our consideration is Senate File 95, Moon Landing Day. Senator Ellis, Representative Closton. I guess I have a question before we start. If this bill passes, will you both be known as Space Cadets?
God willing.
Thank you.
No, members, today, this
Please
morning,
proceed.
we have Senate File 95 before you. I want you to know this lends itself to tons of wonderful puns on the floor, like, oh, is Senate File 95 coming up? I don't know, I spaced it out. There's just so much wonderful fun to be had with this bill. But I know it seems kind of silly, but in all seriousness, this came from a years of an idea that I've had in the making. And it really stemmed from the fact that at the national level, we've had really intense fights about the appropriateness of celebrating Columbus Day versus Indigenous People Day. I tend to be one of the people that don't necessarily think that Columbus Day is appropriate. One of the defenses I've heard is that it was about discovery and exploration. And when I think about Columbus, I think he set out for commercial reasons. It resulted in colonization of a lot of places. And in short, he discovered lands that were already occupied by humans. So that's kind of the negative side of this. But as I've thought about what discovery is, what discovery means, what exploration is, moon landing. And I think it is a uniquely American holiday that we really don't do a great job of celebrating. So along those lines, I was born after the moon landing occurred, and I think my generation really takes for granted all the advances and the amazing things that we've done in our space program over the years. In talking with folks, I just say, yeah, we landed on the moon. But to throw that into perspective of why it was such an amazing feat, from the earliest years of when the Wright brothers took their fledgling flight to 50 years later, we had put someone on the moon. And for those of you who are alive and got to experience that moment, from what I gather, it was a pretty momentous day or monumental day where everything just stopped, and it was a huge source of pride for our country. So in looking at our statutes, we actually already have on the books a commemoration for Native American Day. It's supposed to happen in May. And so looking at the appropriateness of adding this, I wanted to be sure that it was clear that nobody would be affected by having to provide days off. But really, this is just an opportunity for our state to celebrate this wonderfully, uniquely American holiday, and maybe even look internally about how we have supported the moon and space exploration programs over the years. In that light, I'm aware, and this is why I roped in my representative co-chairman here. There is a company up in Gillette that is producing and manufacturing parts that are used for space missions. The University of Wyoming has something that they call the Transiting Exoplanet Survey Satellite, TESS for short, which was launched in 2018. And this satellite is capturing images of outer space that we are so lucky to have. In short, there's a place called the Goldilocks zone where we maybe think there are some dwarf planets that are able, like Earth, similar in size to Earth, that are that right temperature that maybe have water. And so all of this is happening because of astronomers at the University of Wyoming. As I've introduced this bill, I've talked to some really passionate people who remember the day that we landed on the moon, who have been involved with astronauts. We unfortunately couldn't have a 8th grade science teacher at the Wyoming Indian Middle School. He had written me to testify. He said his students are following this, but because it's the middle of their school day, they couldn't quite log in. But he told me his story about how he applied to be the teacher in space, or applied for the teacher in space program, and was politely denied. And fortunately for him, that was the Challenger mission that ended in horrible tragedy. So as I've been working on this, I could go on, and probably will a little bit more as I collect my thoughts. But so this might seem silly, but it really isn't. It's a very loosely worded. The governor may proclaim July 20th as Moon Landing Day, but hopefully this sparks kind of a larger movement as a country for us to really come together. And particularly when I look at the need for us to get our kids excited about STEM learning, science, technology, engineering, and math. Particularly our young girls. We have incredible data that I've been studying for years since I've been on the education committee about the drop-off of girls that want to be in these fields. So we really should be doing as much as we can to really encourage interest in space and technology and engineering and math. So with that, I'm happy to turn it over to my good co-chair or co-sponsor and let him offer his remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Clausen, proceed.
Thank you. When Senator Alice brought this to me, I was like, what? But she brought it to me because we do have a company in Gillette, L&H Manufacturing, that, they made the crawler that would transport the space shuttle to the launch site. They also continue to work with NASA on parts for our space program. What she didn't know is that my wife's family, who had homesteaded in Crook County, Wyoming, 2 of her uncles worked on the Apollo project. So, they talked about like the courage of the astronauts, the heartbreak when things went bad, but just the pride to work on something that no one has done before and to have the whole nation behind you. So when she brought this to me, I just saw it as an opportunity to incorporate STEM, which she talked about, but just also to remind everybody, we had the whole world pulling for us. I mean, maybe not the Russians, right? But everybody else was pulling for us. and what it was like to have the whole country behind one project. So it's just a point of pride and accomplishment for our country, and that's why I'm in favor of this bill. Thank you.
Okay, questions? Any questions? Representative Heiner.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Senator Ellis, thank you for being here. A question on page 2, it says shall be appropriately observed. What's your vision for shall be observed? So it's not may, it's a shall, but what is appropriately observed?
Senator?
Thank you, Chairman Burkhart, Representative Heiner. That's just the typical language that we have in our existing statutes of how we kind of handle these types of holidays. So if you wanted to change that to May, I wouldn't have any problem with that. You know, in other instances, the governor can issue proclamations, and I think really this is an opportunity for school groups in particular, not so much because it's in July, I understand that they're not meeting, but groups, I'm trying to use not proper names, but there's one civic organization that deals with children and they have summertime programs. So a way for them to weave in some of this moon landing, learning about it, and just kind of celebrating it. So there's no mandate that anyone shall do anything necessarily. This is just language we could have typically in the statute. If you felt more comfortable with the may, I will not follow my sword over that.
Okay. Other questions? Okay, thank you. So just hang with us. Any public testimony in the room? Okay, I know we have some people on Zoom, and Senator, I had hoped the grade school class would have been able to join us, but I guess that's not possible.
Mr. Chairman, I found out that the bill had been noticed at 3:30 and I spent a couple of hours just frantically trying to put everything together for this morning, and I did my best. We were hoping to have a little bit more of that, and
All right.
I tried.
And I hope they're at least watching or they can view the video.
Me
later.
too. And so I also should say thank you for allowing for remote testimony. I did, since this bill has been out in the universe, again, great pun, right? I did have met this person who is really involved and very supportive of space programs, and has been involved in trying to get memorials established for things like the Apollo 11, Apollo 13 missions. Is a huge driver between the Sally Ride monument that's going to be unveiled this summer. And so this individual happens to be in California, but is very passionate about space. We had a really great conversation. I thought you'd appreciate just knowing the kind of ripple effect that this little bill has had nationally. So thank you for allowing for the remote testimony.
You're welcome. Thank you. So, and I think other than for maybe Mark and Denise and I, the others in the room were not watching that live. Okay, you're okay. So we have some others also. I can still remember it. Okay. All right. Okay, so I think, Kelly, we have people on, we have 2 who are remote. If you would just admit them, please. Okay, those on who are watching remotely, if you would raise your hand, please, who have already registered to speak. Okay. All right, go ahead. So, and then you're muted. If you would unmute yourself, please. Okay, say something so we know that we can hear you.
Stephen Barber.
Good. So, Mr. Barber, please introduce yourself for the record and if you represent someone.
My name's Stephen Barber. I'm a filmmaker out of Los Angeles, and I was the visionary for the Apollo 11 monument at the Kennedy Space Center, the visionary for the Apollo 13 monument at the Johnson Space Flight Center, and haven't had my coffee yet, and the Sally Ride monument that went up at the Cradle of Aviation Museum on the East Coast last year, and we are unveiling Sally Ride monument at the Ronald Reagan Library July 4th, and you're all invited.
Okay, so Mr. Barber, I'm assuming you are in great support of this bill.
You know, I don't want to take a lot of time. Once again, Stephen Barber, I'm really fortunate. I work with some folks that are really close to you, actually, the Lundins, monument makers right out of Loveland, Colorado, right across the border from you. They are America's greatest sculptors. They are America's greatest visionaries. We came together 5 years ago on what I would just say a God shot. And because of a monument that I saw that they did in the Capitol on Jack Swikert from Apollo 13, who actually ran for senator and became senator and passed away in 1982, didn't quite make it to the Senate. But I was always moved by that. And when I came up with this vision, I reached out to George Lundeen and Mark Lundeen and Joey Boehner. I said, would you guys be interested in building the Apollo 11 monument if I can get it done? And they were like, if you can get it done, we'll start building. And that's how it all started. So I was able to raise $750,000 to build the Apollo 11 monument. Buzz Aldrin is a very good friend of mine. I actually asked Buzz to be on the Zoom call. He's a very busy guy. He's 93. He just got married. So he's a little busy, but he thinks it's a great idea. I would not make this up. This came from Buzz. He said, Stephen, it's a great idea. I'm all supportive, but I can't make the phone call. I'm also good friends with Charlie Duke, 10th man on the moon, Dave Scott, 7th man on the moon, and Harrison Schmidt, who was, I think, the 9th man on the moon. All of these people are in support of this. And what's great about your senator, she's a genius. This woman is a genius, because while our young people are all caught up in, putting a ball through a net or kicking a ball into a goal, it's all about STEM. It's all about science, and these kids are caught up with the Kardashians, which is the worst thing that ever happened to America. And the opportunity to actually start what she is doing could actually become adopted in 49 other states. So I am in such support of this. It's so important that our young people know that, a lot of kids think we faked the moon landing. There's so much garbage out on the internet. So it's so important that we let them know that we went to the moon. We landed 12 men on the moon. We had 6 missions that went to the moon. And I'm more excited about this legislation than I was building the monument, because when I heard about it, I reached out to your senator ASAP, and she and I hit it off right away. And I was just like, you know what? I want to be part of this. I want to make this happen. This is so important, because when you pass this, it will have a groundswell across the country that we care about our kids. We care about science. We care about STEM. And like I said, I'm working on Sally Ride now. We're building her. This is the second Sally Ride monument. I'm working on the first African-American monument. I'm working on the first Hispanic female NASA monument, and I'm working on the first indigenous monument. So this will help my cause as well if the state of Wyoming cares. So that's pretty much all I want to say. I think it's a really noble thing that she's doing. I think it's so based in science and the history of America. And at the end of the day, it's the greatest technological achievement in the history of mankind. We've never done anything this great. That's the greatest thing as human beings we've ever done. 400,000 people came together, and here it is, 55 years later, and we're still talking about it. We're still, bringing it into the classroom. So that's my pungent social commentary for this morning.
Thank you very much, Mr. Barber. So, Kelly, I think we have Laura Pearson on. Ms. Pearson, if you would like to speak, if you would raise your hand on the Zoom connection, please. Okay, so I guess she's decided she doesn't want to speak after that. So anyone else in the room? A couple people have joined us, so we're not done yet. So anyone else want to speak on Senate File 95? Okay, with that, I will close public. Oh,
Mr. Chairman,
please.
just again, if you're not first, you're last. So I think this is a great time for Wyoming to really be leading the nation, and something that might have a really big ripple effect. So anyway, thank you for your time. I appreciate it. And I know when you came in this morning, you probably thought this was a silly little bill, but it actually has, I think, importance, really great importance.
Okay, thank you, Senator. So with that, go ahead. Representative Larson,
Thank
question?
you, Mr. Chairman. Just one last question. Senator Ellis, would you say that maybe putting in this bill, maybe like a paragraph B on page 2, just stating the importance of STEM in our classrooms as well? I mean, would that be a favorable amendment that I could draft with Ellis? So just, I think tying that all in with the discussion would be great as part of recognition of this day.
Senator?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Larson, I love the lawmaking process, so I think, a positive amendment like that to really stress the importance of STEM would be wildly appropriate, and would trust that you could craft that, and happy to take a look at it, but I think that'd be great.
So, Representative, I would caution you on that you're probably going to be outside of the title. So just, it would probably be ruled not germane. I understand it. I can think of some other things I would like to have in here, but I think maybe we should take the direct approach on the bill, and we can always come back at another time. So With that, I will close public testimony. Committee? Moved by Lawley, seconded by Conrad. Okay, any discussion? Okay, Representative Conrad.
First and foremost, I want to thank Senator Ellis, more importantly, for bringing this up to give you some idea how this hits home. I grew up near Walpaw, Canada, Ohio, which doesn't probably, and no one's ever heard of. Well, that was the birthplace of Neil Armstrong. So throughout school, we always studied Neil Armstrong. So this is an incredibly important bill to me. But I will also share with you that part of my senior project, we took the foundational principles from the Apollo missions as I designed a satellite for gamma ray detection. And we used some of the same principles and engineering studies that were done by, more importantly, discovered by Armstrong, Baldwin, and others. So it really hits home. So it's humbling. Thank you.
Representative Lawley?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I too want to thank Senator Ellis and Representative Clouston for bringing this bill. I too have a personal connection to the space program. Of the 14 years I lived in the Houston area, I lived in Clear Lake. My husband spent 10 years in the space program. And I think it's a wonderful thing to acknowledge the importance of the space program, and in particular, the moon landing, and what a difference it's made in our lives. And for Wyoming to step out and do that, I think is a great thing. And I thank you for bringing the bill.
Other questions? I was also politely declined as a mission specialist on the shuttle program that I had applied for that. And just to bring it all in perspective, we're headed back to the moon, hopefully, in the next few years. And my youngest son is a design engineer on the Artemis program. So, and if you want to see pictures of full-scale rocket test, remind me later. So, Representative Knapp.
Mr. Chairman, I do think it's a good bill, and I also have a connection, as I used to drink a lot of Tang growing up. So.
I think that might be lost on some of the younger members here. You might want to explain that. Tang was a breakfast drink that was invented for the astronauts. I think there are others that are probably more palatable, but.
I'll bring some Friday.
Representative Conrad indicated he'll bring some Friday. Okay. Committee?
Mr. Chairman, wouldn't the ballpoint pen also an innovation for writing in space?
Yeah, they spent $50,000 creating a pen that would write in zero gravity. They forgot about pencils. Representative Heiner.
Mr. Chairman, are we ready for an amendment?
Yes, we're considering the bill.
Okay, I proposed an amendment on page 2, line 3, change shall to may.
Okay.
Second.
Seconded by Knapp. Committee, discussion? Representative Knapp?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I think it would be cohesive with the section B where the governor may in advance. I think that should be the same language, whether it's shall or may. So,
okay. All right. Any other comments? Okay. Question being called on the amendment. Mark, do you have that amendment on page 2, line 3? Shall replace that with may. Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Okay, the ayes have it. Amendment is adopted. Any other amendments? Okay. Committee? Question being called. Mark, please take the roll on Senate File 95, Moon Landing Day.
Representative Banks.
Aye.
Representative Conrad.
Aye.
Representative Heiner.
Aye.
Representative Knapp.
Aye.
Representative Larson.
Aye.
Representative Lawley.
Aye.
Representative Tarver.
Aye.
Representative Western. Chairman Bearcart.
Aye.
9-0, do pass.
Okay, Senate File 95, Moon Landing Day has passed the Minerals Committee. Representative Clouston, I assume you will be managing this on the floor. Okay, and all puns aside, it is a good bill. Okay. Okay. Next bill for our consideration is Senate File 154, Energy Authority Project Financing Refineries. Senator Cooper, come on up, present your bill. I think we have about 40 minutes I think that should be plenty of time. Okay? Proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Committee. Ed Cooper, Senate District 20. I'm going to visit with you a little bit about Senate File 154 this morning. It's a really pretty simple bill. The genesis of it, this summer when we had the governor's oil and gas pricing working group, one of the things that we identified was that there's we've just got ourselves in a situation where we have a massive lack of refining in Wyoming. There's not been a new refinery built for more than 60 years here. And we felt like we needed to do something to encourage the expansion of our existing refineries. The option of getting a new refinery built is probably pretty slim, but we do have 4, I believe it is, existing refineries. We'd like 5. We'd like to see them have the opportunity to grow. So this is an instrument to allow the WEA, to Wyoming Energy Authority, to have the authority to issue bonds for financing of refinery expansion. Page 2 of the bill speaks to that. Excuse me, in line 3 through 9. On line 19 of page 2, there was an amendment that was added. It was brought to our attention that probably this would work very well for mineral processing. So a mill of sorts, maybe there would be a bentonite mill or something of that nature, really to help any kind of mineral processing to move forward and obtain financing. So page 3, there's just a talk to the authority to actually issue the bonds. And again, we repeated the mineral finance or mineral processing language. And that's the whole bill. It's pretty straight up. There's not a lot to it. There's been discussion that probably the WEA actually has this authority now, but this clarifies that they do. And hopefully we can take this tool to our refiners and ask them to really look at it. So that's the purpose. So, with that, I'd stand for questions.
Questions for Senator Cooper? Representative Heiner.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Senator Cooper, on page 2, line 18, it's talking about revenue bonds and the authority, and it says may be located within or without the state of Wyoming. What's your idea there about specifying that they can be located outside the state of Wyoming?
Okay.
Senator Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Representative Chairman. This language was brought forward out of existing text in the statutes, and it was the without issue is in regard to pipelines that may be interstate. Within, if you look at line 19, mineral processing and concentration facilities located within the state. So that's the sideboards on that. The processing would be in-state only.
Right. Representative Heiner, I can also explain some of that. That's existing language, and Senator Cooper is correct. This was originally written for pipelines where the pipeline may cross a state line to join into another one, where it would be beneficial to the state to, in effect, provide a bond to complete that line. And I know the ones they were thinking of, they are just across the line into the state to the south of us by about a quarter mile, maybe even a little less in some places where we would tie into those lines. And that's the reason for that existing language. So, okay. Other questions? Representative Conrad.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and a question likely to Senator Cooper as well. It does say bonding is also more importantly, there's an opportunity for bonding for mineral industry and or expansion. Would that include potential rare earth elements or minerals as well for a plant?
Representative Cooper.
Mr.
Please.
Chairman, Representative Conrad, yes, it would. I don't see any reason why this couldn't be carried into that area. That's, that discussion was had, and I believe that's, the consensus is that, yes, it could be carried into that direction also.
Thank you.
Thank you. So before Representative Lawley, committee, remember, we're in 375602B. There's also an extensive A, and then if you look on page 3, that goes into paragraph O. There are a lot of other paragraphs in there that consider some of these issues that we're discussing that are already in there. I can say for a fact that rare earths is included in one of those paragraphs because I put it there. We've opened up the authority of the Energy Authority to do a lot of things other than just pipelines and electrical transmission lines. They pretty much have authority to do any industrial projects. This just clarifies that we can use it for specifically for refineries. So Representative Lawley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Cooper, my good senator, I mentioned to you earlier, I think we might want to add a little bit to the official title of the bill to kind of take into account the amendments the Senate made, and I just wanted to see if you had any thoughts about that.
Senator Cooper.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Lawley, that discussion was had, and we pushed it back and forth both ways and finally decided just to leave it alone. But if it's the wish of this committee, I don't think we can say anything at all. It maybe clarifies it a little bit.
All right. Any other questions? Representative Western.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Cooper, just to make sure I understand this correctly, we're basically allowing the state to be on the hook for raising bonds to own in part or in entirety energy infrastructure such as these refineries. Am I understanding just kind of the broad overall contention here?
Senator Cooper.
Mr. Chairman, making sure I understand the question, the intent is to allow them to expand existing refineries. So it would be refineries that are owned by whoever it may be. I don't think the intent was for purchase, but I don't know if it could be interpreted that way or not. But the intent is to give us a tool to finance the expansion of existing refineries. Was the original intent. So,
Mr. Chairman, follow up?
Follow up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So Senator Cooper, so I guess in the expansion, obviously this allows up to $3 billion. We all know refineries are just very capital intensive projects, whether to build one, to expand them, et cetera. But under that kind of expansion situation, we're guaranteeing, the state of Wyoming is guaranteeing these bonds to the people who buy them in exchange for ownership in that expansion? Or I guess, how does that ownership structure work in terms of, we're putting our capital and our guarantee, on the line here in exchange for share of the profits in the expansion or in the ownership of the expansion, or how would that kind of situation work?
So Senator Cooper, before you answer, just committee, please stay on the topic of the bill. The bonding is already in statute. We aren't here really debating the bonding issue. We are debating whether we want to include refineries in here. So bonding is already in statute. That's to me, a completely different issue. And there are other portions of statute that have that same bonding requirement in there. So Senator Cooper, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With that comment, I would, Senator or Representative Western, I would, I would say that that might be an internal discussion for your committee. But as the chairman said, the bonding is in place. The bonding authority of the WEA for $3 billion is in place, and the structure of those bonds would be within the WEA as I understand it.
Follow up, Representative Western.
Mr. Chairman, I fully appreciate that. Obviously, that's already in statute, but again, in this scenario where if we include the refinery component for an expansion under this scenario, I'm just trying to figure out how would that, you know, how would that
Correct.
work in terms of, again, do we own a portion of the expansion, our share of profits? How would that be structured? This be included in the bonding statutes? To
Senator Cooper?
include
I'm sorry,
refineries?
I didn't mean to step on your question. Senator Cooper?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I believe, it's my understanding of it that, and I'm not fully versed in this, but it's my understanding that the state sets an interest rate and we collect interest on the bonds, and I can look into that further for the representative if that would be helpful. But I would have to discuss that with the WEA and see how their guarantee on the bonds really actually works. So unless someone
Okay.
here in the room already has an opinion on that. Thank you.
So, Senator, I'll just go, maybe jump ahead a little bit. I really have some issues whether the additional language in B is even in the right place. I know that's what the Senate did, but there are other places we talk about bonds for mineral production and other things, because this is in the section that talks about transmission facilities, pipelines, and those. The statutes on the Energy Authority are a little convoluted in how they were written, and we've tried to clean them up over the years, and there's still some goofiness in there, I guess you could say. So, okay. Any other questions for Senator Cooper? Representative Heiner?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Cooper, by adding the mineral processing facilities into this statute, in my area of the state, there's a number of expansion projects for Trona being planned and contemplated. Are there any conversations from those industries that they would tap into this bonding authority to build those new facilities?
I'm sorry, Senator Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Heiner, we haven't had direct conversations with them, but that would be our hope that we would be able to pull any type of expansion like this into the loop and bring them forward to the WEA and for financing.
Follow up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So expanding upon that with the refineries and their expansion, and we've heard of the difficulties for financing right now for ESG purposes and fossil fuels. Have you had conversations with any refineries about expansion contingent upon this bonding authority that you're proposing in this legislation?
Senator Cooper?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Heiner, no, I have not personally. Like I said, this was brought to us by the governor's office, and whether the governor's advisor has had that conversation, I couldn't tell you. Mr. Chairman, just to speak to the relocation of some of this language, it got moved around a little bit already. The good senator that was here a bit ago put a lot of work into it. She did a great job of moving things where she thought they needed to be. With her attention to detail. So if you feel like you need to move things around, I guess that's a committee decision.
Okay, thank you, Senator. And I think when we discuss the bill, I think that's an issue we should discuss, and I'll bring up my issues at that time. So, any more questions for Senator Cooper? Okay. Thank you, Senator. Just bear with us, please. Okay, anyone in the room who wishes to speak on Senate File 154, Ms. Kopska? You sure? Okay. Mr. Obermueller? Okay. No? Okay. Anyone remotely? Okay. Committee, with that, I will close public testimony. Committee? Moved by Larson, seconded by Lawley. So, committee, I'll start this. Like I said, the statutes for the Energy Authority are kind of convoluted because it was created out of two agencies, the Pipeline Authority and the Infrastructure Authority. It should have been completely rewritten at the time, but it wasn't. So we have both Pipeline Infrastructure Authority, which were really power lines, Plus, over time, we've added to it. If you go into the statutes and look, we've included practically any industrial operation you want. Maybe refineries was a oversight. I would like more time to look at the additions that were made in the sections they were made. I think they need to go somewhere else more efficiently. I don't know that we can do that here, but because it, and then when you look at the catch title, Energy Authority financing refineries, I know that the Trona industry considers what they do with Trona as a refinery. And other companies consider what they do as a type of refinery. So I think we probably need to look at that with maybe the potential outside of the committee for floor amendments on this. And after we're done, I will take offline the discussion of the bonding. I have some other information for you. Representative Larson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I just like to echo what you said, and if we do decide to move forward with some amendments outside of the committee, I'd be happy to work with you on that.
Okay. Representative Lawley.
Again, I mentioned earlier that I would like to look at an amendment of the official title. I am concerned that we don't, it's so specific about oil and gas refineries that if we don't expand it to adding mineral processing facilities, that we might have a little issue there, whether it really describes the bill. So.
All right, and Representative Lawley, I think we've already covered mineral processing facilities. I don't remember all the statutes off the top of my head, but I'm pretty sure we addressed that in one of the other paragraphs on the Energy Authority's responsibilities, mission, that sort of thing. So I think it would behoove all of us to look through those statutes before this bill gets to the floor, which will most likely be tomorrow. So
I guess my concern is that this bill and the description of the bill, page 1, lines 1 through 6, don't include some of the things the Senate added to this bill. And that, I guess, is my concern, but just put it out there.
okay, thank you, Representative. Any other discussion? Okay, well, I think we need to do one thing though. Committee? Moved by Heiner? Oh, it was
Yeah,
moved. Okay, thank you. It's been a very short and very long morning in both ways. Okay, so committee, any other discussion on the bill? Any amendments that you want to propose here? Yes, Representative Western.
I mean, I certainly appreciate the idea, and I'm fine supporting the bill, but I think in the big picture, I'm sure Vice Chair Heiner could probably speak more in depth on this, just give his experience, but if you look at the traditional financing route for these things, where they go to these traditional financing institutions, I mean, some of these loans are decades and decades long. Where if we did do this, my concern is that if we finance, up to $3 billion for a refinery, halfway through the amortization, a bunch of regs come down from the federal government that basically really inhibit the profitability or the viability of the plant and then, or the refinery, and then all of a sudden the state of Wyoming is on the hook for what are now breach of covenant bonds. So that's the scenario that I would be worried with. It is obviously outside the scope of this bill, but that's the big picture concern for me.
All right, and those are very good points, Representative. Any other discussion? Okay, not hearing any other discussion? Question being called. Mark, would you please call roll on Senate File 154, Energy Authority Project Financing Refineries?
Representative Banks,
Aye.
Representative Conrad,
Aye.
Representative Heiner. Aye. Representative Knapp,
Aye.
Representative Larson,
Aye.
Representative Lawley,
Aye.
Representative Tarver, Representative Western, Chairman Burkhart,
Aye.
9 ayes, no noes.
Okay, Senate File 154, Engrossed Energy Authority Project Financing Refineries has passed the Minerals Committee, and I guess it will either be Representative Heiner or myself on the floor. Representative Heiner, feel like hearing it? Sure. Okay. All right, so committee, We're adjourned.